hashtag facts. And so in this world of beautiful information, we have so much information. We can all be Google trainers of workout. I got a foam roller for Christmas, and all of a sudden I'm a professional foam roller because I'm looking at all the facts and what they do. And all of a sudden I'm telling, people last night, and I was telling my son about all the great benefits of foam rolling, and I've never even done it. But I have the facts and I've gathered them all up, and it's like the fascia and the muscles. We want to like break the saran wrap around our muscles, and it'll promote like all this stuff because I have the facts. I don't know if you can relate to posting something on your social media and you're like, yeah, this is so good, this post, and it's kind of like you're kind of like trying to prove something that kind of goes contrary to the social understanding, and then somebody does this thing and it's called snoops. It's a fact checker, and all of a sudden they post that on your fact that you just put up, and you're like, oh, how embarrassing. My fact checker, I got blown out of the water. Now I got to take that post down. It was really good, but it wasn't actually real facts. And so in this world of false information and false facts, I just thought I would talk about facts. And the real fact is if you don't get anything out of this talk, the real fact, and this is what I get excited about, is that there is the ability to have a relationship with God that will transform your life and will solve all of your problems. And in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, I want to just bring up 4 facts that I've found in a meditation that me and my sponsor were doing, and I just want to share that with you. So the first fact is on page 17 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it says this, that we have this common peril is one of the elements of a powerful cement. We have this problem, we have this issue that we all have. We have, whatever the addiction is, whatever the go-to is for you. Maybe it's food, maybe it's cutting yourself, maybe it's internet stuff, maybe it is relationship stuff, maybe it is alcohol or drugs, whatever it is. And at the bottom of it, we have this disconnect spiritually. We have this uneasy, restless, irritable, discontented spirit, and we're trying to do everything in our ability to manage that condition. And so that is this common peril that we have. And then it says we have a tremendous fact. So fact number 1 is a tremendous fact. And we can all repeat that later today. We can go, I have a tremendous fact. And somebody will be like, what is your tremendous fact? And you can say that the tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. The solution to all of my problems is a relationship with God. That is our tremendous fact. And then we have a couple more facts on page 25 of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Some of you are familiar with this book and some of you aren't. I would love for everybody to read this book. At the very least, you will get an understanding of addiction and the disease of it. So on page 25, we have 2 facts. And I'll explain the difference of them. So fact number 1 is the great fact, and fact number 2, I guess this would be the second and third fact. Fact number 2 is the great fact, and fact number 3 is the central fact. So the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. What it's saying is that we have undertaken a process of recovery, and the great fact is that we have been transformed from the inside out, that all of our thinking about money and finances and work and relationships have been totally transformed. And here we go with the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that a creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. So I think for me, the difference is there's this ability to contact God in a way that will transform my life. And then there's a way to live it out, to actually experience it. And so I think that's the biggest difference. It kind of seems like they're the same fact, but when I was meditating on it, I thought of the ability to get my car license, the ability to be able to drive is a great fact. It's going to change my life. It's going to allow me freedom that I never had before. It's going to allow me to whip down to Toronto and go hang out with cool people in a big city. It's going to let me do things that I've never done before. It's going to change the way I think about a lot of things. And the central fact is that I actually become an owner of a car. And so I have the access to that car and the ability to drive at any given time, but really understanding that I have to maintain that car as well. And so it's kind of like I go from being a participant to being an owner. There's a pretty big difference in that. I don't know if you have the ability to drive a car. I guarantee that you don't have ability to drive everybody's car. And so if you went into a parking lot with parked cars and somebody left their car running, you could drive that for sure legally. Okay, except that you stole the car. But imagine having the ability to have your own car. I forget who said it, but I remember hearing a speaker and they said that a man with an experience is never at a mercy of a man with just knowledge. And so that's what this is. The great fact is that I can have knowledge that goes into an experience and changes the course of my life. And so I had this experience myself where I was in early recovery in 2006, still fighting for my life, still hearing the voices in my head that, like early recovery, there's so much tension. There's just this responsibility that I never had felt before. There's, a lot of pressure. There's a lot of expectations. Just in that first year of recovery can be very hard. And especially if you don't have the right, tools and probably none of us have the right tools at the beginning, but if we don't have the right fellowship and we don't have the people around us, and if we don't have the support systems, it can be really challenging. And so I was faced with that in the first year and coming back home with 2 kids and a wife. And, me and my wife lived the addicted life for 15 years. We know each other from high school. So right now we have 15 years of addiction life, and now we have 15 years of sober life. And so the first few years of sober life were a little bit crazy. And I really was really fighting for my life and going that, really understanding that alcohol and drugs were never really my problem. It was my solution. The problem was here. I remember going into treatment center at a homeless shelter, and I remember walking in there going, I don't know what's going to happen or what solution they're going to give me or what, daily routines are going to give me to get my life back on track. But as long as this stops, and that's the great fact that God actually makes this stop. And so I'm looking for resources and all this stuff. And my mom, the person that has been praying for me for the last 15 years for her little boy to get sober, she found this guy that was doing a retreat. And it was, I was looking in the inner healing stuff. I was looking at root causes of the spiritual restlessness that I have. One of the facts of my life that I was adopted. And I grew up in the church. And I knew about this God, but I never felt God. I never had an experience with God. And so my mom was trying to point me in the right direction. So I go up to this retreat with all these dudes, and we have some good food, and we come into the chapel, and they do a little bit of a service, and some people have a little bit of a story like mine. And then we get a little break, and the pastor said, okay, we're going to come back for an afterglow. And I'm like, I hear that word, and I'm like, that's weird. What's am I in a cult? Like, what's happening right now? I was a little bit anxious. I knew some guys from treatment that I was in. There was two guys that were from my treatment center. And so I got talking to them, and I said, oh, this church stuff is really weird. Like, do you guys want to just go and smoke by the water and, hang out? And there's like, they were really into it. And so they convinced me to go back in. And by the time we got back in, I was sitting in the front row. And the pastor just, the lights were dim, and it was they were setting an intimate setting, which I was super awkward with. And I just was open to listen, and the pastor explained a relationship with God. And he just said, if anybody needs healing or wants a deeper relationship with God, stand up. And I found myself standing up, and I'm like, oh no, I'm in the front row thinking I'm the only one standing up. And the pastor began to pray for everybody that was standing up, and I wasn't alone. And then, to my horror, people started touching me. They put their hands on me and started praying for me. So I just didn't know what to do except fold my arms and shut my eyes and hope for the best. And as I shut my eyes, I had a video in my head of a story that my mom had shared with me many years ago, and it was a story about my dad being a pastor, and the church lets up after the service, and everybody's leaving. And this lady starts talking to my mom and says, hey, is that your son? And my mom says, yes. My mom's never seen this lady, never saw her again. And the lady says, I just want you to know that he's troubled, but he's going to be okay. And I felt for the first time God speak to my heart in my own language that I'm going to be okay. And all of a sudden, I recognized my body posture was like this, like I was in a fighting stance my whole life, and the tension of it and the anxiety of it. And all of a sudden I was feeling this warm flood of like liquid love is all I could describe it as. And it was causing me to put down my shoulders and put down my hands. And I could see this cloud that was evaporating. It was a cloud full of anger and fear and rage and tension and all of that stuff that had been with me all of my life, and it was just evaporating. And I was like, tears rolling down my face. It's the first time I've ever actually felt love. I never knew what that was. And the pastor says, everybody sit down. I got snot hanging down my face. I got tears. I'm like doing the man cry, and I just really don't know what's going on. And I'm having all this emotion and feeling, and it's overwhelming. And so then he says, anybody here that has heard from God, would you just share what you've heard? And I think I rolled my eyes at that point, and I'm like, yeah, okay. No one's going to hear from God. He doesn't speak to anybody. I haven't heard anything. And a couple of people shared something, and somebody right behind me shared, I heard that God has just told me that somebody in this room that's been fighting drugs and alcohol their whole life, God wants you to know that you're going to be okay. And I'm like, it just shattered any manly strength in me. And I was like, oh, and I actually was so overwhelmed I had to leave the room. And I believe that this is the great fact that we're talking about, is that God can come and change all of my thinking. He can take the weight off of my shoulders, and he can breathe life into me. And for me, that's really a step 3 experience, where what we would say is that we come to believe in a God, and that we turn our will and our lives over to him. But it's really important, I think, to have God gave me this experience so that I could turn my will and my life over to the care of him. And I know that I came home from that retreat a very different person. That night, it felt like there was a hand that had been lifted off my head, and I came up to breathe for the first time. I took my first breath of real air. There was a freedom that I had never known before. And so it got me into doing recovery and really getting into it and really trying to understand how to go through the process of recovery and inventory and all that stuff. A little while later, I had another experience where I was working full time and back into a trade that I was familiar with in heavy equipment, and we were building a residential pond. I had one of those massive, cool dump trucks, Tonka toys, for big Tonka, real Tonka toys, and so I had been doing that for a couple months, and you got to pay your bills somehow, and getting back into the home life and all that stuff. And if you know anything about construction, you're 10 hour days every day of the week. And I believe that my recovery kind of got the back seat, I guess, is what I would say. And one day, I get up for work, and it had been raining a little bit, and the yard had got shut down, so we had no work. I was up. I called my dad and said, "Hey, do you want to have breakfast? Do you want to make me breakfast? I'll come over. I'm the son whom you love. Make me breakfast." And I got a teaching video, so he made me breakfast, and we got watching this teaching, and the teacher was relating a teaching on the Bible in Matthew, and the message was, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God," and all I heard was, "Seek ye first recovery, and all of these things will be added unto you. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you." Like, seek God first, and your bills will be paid, your relationships will get sorted out. You'll never have to defend yourself. You will never have to go and do the things that your old life demanded you of. And so it struck me in a way that I had never sensed before. And that day I was able to quit my job. I told my wife, "I'm quitting my job. I'm going to seek God. That's all I'm going to do." And so I went into volunteer everywhere. I went to every meeting that I could find. And basically what I did was give God everything, everyone, the good, the bad, take it all away. I put it up on the altar, and I said, "Here's my life. Do what you will with it, but I'm going to hang out with you." And that's what I did. And I found a pastor, and we hung out every day. I believe that every pastor needs a good old crackhead, and I was that guy for my pastor. And so we went. He taught me how to pray. We went to hospitals. We did Bible studies. I did recovery stuff, and I really got my life out of recovery instead of fitting recovery into my life. And I've had so many cool things happen, even recently. Vicky wins a trip. My wife wins a trip on Instagram. Like, who does that? All expenses paid, down to Toronto. And so we decided to go to Toronto for this cool vacation, and we got restaurants and all of the CN Tower, the aquarium. If you guys get a chance, go to the aquarium. I'm not a big going on tour guy, but the aquarium was fantastic. It was really cool. And so we do all this stuff, and I realized that one of my friends that has been in recovery, around recovery for probably 11 years or so since I've known him. He's down in Toronto, and he's in the hospital. And I just felt like, man, this is a really elaborate way for God to send us somewhere to pray for somebody. So we went and prayed for him. I thought that was really cool. Like, man, send me around the world. I'll go pray for people. I thought that was really cool. But the day before, we're at a little pizzeria, and I see the owner. This is at lunchtime. I see the owner, and he's watching soccer very emphatically. And so immediately I pick up on that there might be money riding on this game. You're just familiar with what you've done in your lifetime before. So I get talking to his wife, and I just say, "Oh, your husband got a little money on this game, eh?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, he gambles. He lost some money yesterday, so he's trying to make up." And I'm like, "Well, no." I think she said, "Well, he's not a gambling addict." And yeah, I go, "Oh, I know. We all say that." And I talked about my gambling and how I got sober 15 years ago, and I haven't played pro line since, and all that. And she's like, "Oh wow, that's possible to happen." And I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Well, I have a friend in Ottawa who's in recovery at a home." And Vicky asks what home, or says what home, and she goes, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Well, obviously we would know her because she's been coming to our church." And she shows me a picture, and I'm like, "No way, I know her." I go, "Take a selfie." So we take a selfie, and she sends it to her. And When we got home, the next weekend, I saw the girl that received the selfie, and I said, "Wasn't that the coolest thing?" And she goes, "Yeah, I was so down on recovery, and I was planning on just leaving." And she goes, "When I saw that picture," she goes, "There's a great fact that God is real." Like, what are the odds of you bumping into my friend? And just crazy. And so there's so many amazing things that happen because there is the central fact, the great fact, and the tremendous fact that we can have a relationship with God that will change our lives so drastically. My last fact is the blessed fact on page 100. Um, I'm just giving you all the facts that are in this book. It is on page 100, two paragraphs down, and it says, "Ask them to remember when they are impatient the blessed fact of his sobriety." And basically, we can go day by day, month by month, year by year, and it gets hard, or we forget, or it's not going how we think it should, or a family member might have different expectations. But the blessed fact is the paragraph up. It says, "Follow the dictates of a higher power." So follow God, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances are. And so it's not get focused on the micro stuff that can bother us and get us impatient and distract us, all of that stuff. We live out of the relationship of God. We live in the confidence that God has entered in our heart. We are car owners, and we get to drive like that. One last quick story. I know I'm out of time, but we were talking about this. I was just like, I hate trying to, it never goes well when I'm trying to teach my wife something. It just doesn't. So I try to do it in a way that I'm learning. And so I was talking about this. How do I live in a relationship of owning the car? And so I was talking about, like, always watch and turn. So I'm watching for my mind to start spinning or start being negative or start being insecure, full of self-pity or full of fear, all of those things. And I turn it to focus it on what will God have me be or say, or how do I help somebody? And I think what I was talking about was always being prepared to give a message, always being prepared. And this is Sunday afternoon. And so I was just talking about, getting into my head and turning, and then trying to prepare a message of recovery or a message of hope or whatever it is. And so, and half an hour later, the person that was speaking on Sunday canceled. And so we're like going to church in an hour or 2 hours. And I was like, as if that happened. And Vicky's like, "Oh, what you just said, I got a message in my head." I'll do it. And that's the beautiful thing that we have. I was reminded of the woman at the well, and Jesus meets the woman at the well, and she's getting the water. And Jesus says, "I have water that you'll never need water again. And I have everlasting water." And that's the truth. That's the facts, that we have a fountain within us that if we tap into that on a daily basis, that God will give us everything that we need, and he'll give us a prepared message at any given time. It's a beautiful way to live. And I guess I would just leave us with this. In 1 John 4:18, it says that God's perfect love will cast out all fear. My one responsibility in this relationship is bringing my fears to the altar of God for him to burn them away. And that's what a consensual, loving relationship does. It doesn't just take everything. I actually enter into a relationship where I actually have to give these offerings to him. And so that's the process of the inventories we get to do, is really sift through it and bring up our core fears and let him take them away. So those are the facts: the great fact, the tremendous fact, the central fact, and the blessed fact. Love you all. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of the meeting.